Hello, we are so excited to show you our native speech capabilities. Welcome back to the English journey. Today, we are exploring a quiet superpower that can change how you experience the world, the power of not reacting. My name is Anna, and I am here to guide you through the language of emotional control and inner peace using clear, easy English.
And I am Abel. I am so glad to be here with you, Anna. It is so easy to get angry or upset when someone cuts you off in traffic or sends a rude email at work. Today, we want to talk about why holding on to your calm is the ultimate form of strength and how learning to pause can rapidly improve your life and your English.
That is a perfect way to introduce our topic today, Abel. And I want to start by asking you something very simple and very honest. When was the last time you reacted to something and then later wished you had not?
Oh, Anna, that is a great question. And honestly, I do not have to think very far back. Just last week, I was driving to work in the morning. It was early, I was tired, I had my coffee in my hand, and suddenly a car just came out of nowhere and cut right in front of me. I mean, there was almost no space at all. I felt this huge wave of anger come up from my chest. I honked my horn loudly, I said some words I'm not very proud of. And then I arrived at work feeling stressed and irritated, and that feeling stayed with me for almost the whole morning. And the other driver, he was probably already far away, completely fine, not thinking about me at all.
That story is so real, and I think almost every person listening to us right now has had a very similar experience. And what you just described perfectly illustrates the difference between reacting and responding. These two words look similar, and they both describe something you do after something happens to you, but they are completely different in meaning and in result. A reaction is immediate. It's fast, automatic, and emotional. It happens before your thinking brain has time to get involved. A response, on the other hand, is something you choose. It's slower, calmer, and it comes from a place of thought rather than feeling.
So when I honked my horn and shouted, that was a reaction. My body just did it before I even decided to.
Exactly right. Your body felt a threat, and it responded in a very old, very primitive way. This is actually something scientists call the fight or flight response. When we feel danger or strong discomfort, our brain sends a signal, and chemicals like adrenaline flood into our body very quickly. Our heart beats faster, our muscles tighten, and we become ready to fight or to run. This was very useful thousands of years ago when humans were facing real physical dangers, like wild animals. But today, most of our threats are not physical at all. They're social, they're emotional. Someone says something unkind, someone takes credit for our work, someone is rude to us online, and yet our brain reacts in the same way it did for our ancient ancestors facing a lion.
That is fascinating. So my brain literally thought a car cutting me off was as dangerous as a lion attack?
In a simplified way, yes, the part of your brain responsible for survival does not easily distinguish between a physical threat and an emotional one. That's why emotional situations can feel so overwhelming and so urgent. The key skill we're talking about today is learning to create a small pause between the moment something happens to you and the moment you choose how to respond. That tiny space of time is where your real power lives.
I love that idea, a small pause. It sounds simple, but I imagine it's not always easy to find that pause in the heat of the moment.
You're absolutely right that it takes practice. But before we talk about how to find that pause, I want to share a metaphor with you that I find incredibly helpful. I call it the burning match metaphor. Imagine someone is holding a lit match. That match represents another person's anger or their rudeness or their negativity. Now, a burning match needs fuel to keep burning. It needs oxygen, it needs something to catch on. If you react to that person's anger with your own anger, you're providing the fuel. You're giving the fire exactly what it needs to grow bigger. But if you choose not to react, if you simply stay calm and don't engage, the match has nothing to feed on. And eventually, without fuel, the flame just goes out on its own.
Oh, I really like that, the burning match. So the other person's anger can only become a big fire if I give it something to burn.
Precisely. And this is something we see in everyday life all the time. Think about arguments on social media. Someone posts something angry or provocative. Other people react angrily. Those people react back, and suddenly what started as one small comment becomes a massive argument involving dozens of people, all of them feeling frustrated and upset. Nobody feels better at the end. Nobody wins. But if that first angry comment had simply been ignored, the flame would have gone out very quickly, with no audience and no fuel.
That makes so much sense when you describe it that way, and I think I've definitely been guilty of adding fuel to those kinds of fires. Actually, this makes me think of something that happened to me at work a few months ago. Can I share that story?
Please, yes, I think our listeners will really connect with a real example from your life.
Okay, so I had been working very hard on a big project at my office. I spent weeks on it, late nights, extra hours, a lot of effort. And when the project was finished and sent to the whole team, I received an email from a colleague. Now, this colleague and I, we've had some tension before. We don't always see things the same way. In this email, it was not kind. It pointed out several things she thought were wrong with my work, but the way she wrote it was sharp and cold. There was no thank you for your effort or good job overall. It felt like she was attacking me personally, not just commenting on the work. And I remember reading that email and feeling my face get hot. My hands started to shake a little. I wanted to type back immediately. I had the reply window open and I was already writing. And what I was writing was not very professional at all.
What did you write?
I wrote something like, maybe if you had contributed more to this project, you would understand how much work went into it. And I was about to press send. My finger was right there on the button, but something made me stop. I think it was just a moment of doubt, a small voice that said, wait. And I closed the laptop and I walked away.
That moment of doubt, that small voice, that's exactly what we want to develop and strengthen. What happened when you came back to the email later?
I came back about an hour later, and honestly, Anna, when I read my draft reply, I felt embarrassed. It was petty, it was defensive, it would have made things so much worse. Instead, I wrote a short, professional response that acknowledged her points calmly and offered to have a meeting to discuss the project further. And she actually replied very normally. The tension just sort of disappeared. I'll never know for sure, but I believe that if I had sent that first angry reply, we would have had a serious problem at work that could have gone on for a long time.
What you did in that moment is something psychologists call emotional regulation. That simply means the ability to manage your feelings so that they don't control your actions. And what's beautiful about your story is that you didn't pretend you weren't angry. You were angry, you felt it fully, but you chose not to act from that place of anger. You gave yourself time, and in that time, the initial wave of emotion passed, and your thinking brain was able to take over.
Yes, and I think that's an important point. I wasn't trying to pretend I didn't feel anything. The anger was real. I just didn't let it make my decisions for me.
That distinction is so important. Not reacting does not mean not feeling. It does not mean being cold or robotic or indifferent. It simply means that your emotions inform you, but they do not control you. You feel the anger, you notice it, you respect it as information, and then you choose your next step carefully. This is what we call emotional intelligence, and it is one of the most valuable skills any person can develop in their entire life.
So how do we actually do this in practice? Because in the moment, when someone is rude to us or something unfair happens, it feels almost impossible to pause. The feeling is so strong.
Yes, and that is the challenge. So let me walk you through something I call the 5-second rule for inner peace. It is a simple technique, but when practiced consistently, it becomes very powerful. The first step is simply to breathe. The moment you feel that strong wave of emotion, you take one slow, deliberate breath. Not a quick breath, a long, intentional one, in through the nose and out through the mouth. This single breath sends a signal to your nervous system that you are safe. It literally begins to slow your heart rate and lower the intensity of what you are feeling.
So even just one breath makes a physical difference in your body?
It does. The science behind this is very well established. Deep, controlled breathing activates what is called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is essentially the calm, resting part of your body's control system. It counteracts the fight or flight response we talked about earlier. So that one breath is not just symbolic, it is actually changing your body chemistry in real time.
That is amazing. Okay, so step one is to breathe. What comes next?
The second step is to label what you are feeling. This might sound strange, but research in psychology has shown that when you name an emotion, you reduce its power over you. So instead of just feeling the anger as a massive, overwhelming force inside you, you say to yourself, quietly, internally, I am feeling angry right now. Or perhaps, I am feeling frustrated. Or I am feeling hurt. You give the emotion a name and a shape, and what happens is quite remarkable. The brain shifts slightly from the emotional center to the language center, and that shift creates just enough distance for you to regain some control.
I've actually tried something like this before without really knowing the theory behind it. When I am very stressed, I sometimes say to myself, okay, I am stressed, this is just stress, and it does help a little.
Yes, you've been doing it intuitively. And for our English learners who are listening right now, this is a wonderful reason to practice your English even in private, in your own mind. When you feel a strong emotion, try to label it in English. Say to yourself, I am feeling overwhelmed, or I'm feeling disappointed right now, or I feel disrespected and I need a moment. Using English in this way turns your emotional experience into a language learning experience at the same time. You are training your brain to think in English, and you are also training your brain to manage its emotions. It's genuinely two skills developing at once.
I love that so much. So my inner English practice can also be my inner calm practice. That's a beautiful idea.
The third step in the 5-second rule is to ask yourself a single, quiet question before you speak or act. And that question is simply this: will my response make this situation better or worse? Just that one question, not a long analysis, not a detailed plan, just that one honest question. And often the answer comes back very quickly and very clearly. If you are about to say something sharp and defensive, the answer is almost always worse. And that answer alone can stop you from doing something you will regret.
That is such a clean and practical tool. One breath, name the feeling, ask one question. I think even I can remember that under pressure.
And the more you practice it in smaller, lower stakes situations, the more automatic it becomes when the big emotional moments arrive. Think of it like going to a gym. You don't start by lifting the heaviest weights. You build strength gradually. And emotional regulation is exactly the same. You practice staying calm in small frustrations, like a slow internet connection or a long queue at the supermarket. And slowly, your capacity for calm in bigger situations grows stronger.
That is a great point. I shouldn't wait for the big crisis to practice. I should practice on the small things every day.
Exactly. And this brings me to another concept I want to discuss with you today, which is the idea of protecting your energy. This is something that's talked a lot about in conversations about mental health and well-being, and it's deeply connected to the power of not reacting. Every time you engage in an unnecessary argument, every time you allow someone's bad mood to infect your own, every time you react to provocation and enter a conflict that serves no real purpose, you spend energy, mental and emotional energy, and that energy is not unlimited.
That is so true. After big arguments, I feel completely exhausted, even if the argument was about something small and silly.
Yes, because emotional conflict is genuinely tiring. It takes real resources from your mind and body. And here's the crucial insight. Choosing not to engage with someone who is trying to provoke you is not weakness. It's not cowardice. It's not backing down. It's a sophisticated and deliberate decision to protect your most valuable resource, which is your mental clarity and your peace of mind.
I think sometimes people worry that if they don't argue back, others will think they are weak, or that they don't care, or that they're accepting bad treatment.
That is a very common and very understandable concern, and the answer to it lies in understanding the difference between setting a boundary and engaging in a battle. A boundary is a calm, clear communication of what you will and will not accept. You can say, I am not willing to have this conversation when we are both this upset. Let us talk when things are calmer.
That is powerful, that is firm, that is self-respecting. But you are doing it without raising your voice, without matching the other person's anger, and without descending into a cycle of attack and counterattack. You are simply withdrawing your fuel from the burning match.
That is a really empowering way to think about it. You can still protect yourself and maintain your dignity without becoming the storm yourself.
Which brings me to one of my favorite ideas in all of mindfulness and emotional intelligence, and that is what I call the observer mindset. This is the practice of learning to watch your own thoughts and emotions as if you are an outside observer, rather than being completely consumed by them. Imagine you were sitting outside on a hillside on a partly cloudy day. Dark clouds sometimes roll across the sky. Maybe they are heavy and gray and they look dramatic. But you, sitting on that hillside, you are not the clouds. You are the sky. The clouds move through you. They pass. Some days there are many dark clouds, and some days there are very few. But the sky itself is always there, always larger than any cloud, always present.
That is a beautiful image. So the dark thoughts and the angry feelings are the clouds, and I am trying to remember that I am the sky, not the storm.
Exactly. And when you are in the middle of a very difficult emotional moment, this practice of stepping back and observing what you are feeling, rather than becoming the feeling, gives you a profound sense of space and choice. You might even try saying to yourself silently, I notice that anger is arising in me right now. Not, I am angry, which makes you identical with the emotion, but rather, I notice that anger is here. It sounds like a small difference, but it creates an important psychological distance.
Okay, that one I want to try. I notice that frustration is arising in me right now. Just saying it that way in my mind makes it feel less overwhelming already, like I am watching it rather than being buried under it.
That is exactly the shift we are looking for. And for English learners, practicing this kind of self-talk in English has a double benefit, as we mentioned before. You are developing your ability to describe internal states with precision, which is a genuinely advanced language skill. Words like frustrated, overwhelmed, disrespected, provoked, unsettled, these are rich, nuanced vocabulary words, and learning them in the context of your real emotional life means you'll never forget them.
I think there is something very freeing about putting words to what you feel. Sometimes when I cannot describe what's wrong, the feeling is just this big, dark, formless thing. But when I can name it, it gets smaller somehow.
Language is genuinely a tool for understanding ourselves, not just for communicating with others. And that's one of the most profound reasons to keep learning and expanding your vocabulary. Every new word for a feeling or an experience gives you a finer instrument for navigating your inner world. And when you can navigate your inner world with more precision, you are less at the mercy of it.
Anna, can we talk for a moment about what happens with people in our lives who seem to consistently want conflict? Not just a stranger who cuts us off in traffic, but maybe a family member or a coworker or even a friend who is always pushing, always finding something to argue about.
Yes, absolutely, because this is where the challenge becomes more personal and more sustained. When it's a stranger, the interaction ends quickly and you probably never see them again. But when it's someone in your regular life, someone you see frequently, the emotional management becomes much more demanding. And in these situations, the principle of not reacting becomes even more essential.
Because if you react every time they try to provoke you, you're essentially rewarding the behavior. You're telling them in a way that the provocation works.
That is a remarkably insightful observation. Yes, when someone learns that they can reliably get a strong emotional reaction from you, they have found what psychologists sometimes call an emotional trigger. And some people, often without even being fully aware of it, return to that trigger again and again because the reaction they get gives them a sense of power or control, or at least engagement. When you stop reacting, you remove that dynamic entirely. You are no longer playing the game, and without a partner to play with, the game simply cannot continue.
So staying calm isn't just good for my peace of mind, it can actually change the dynamic of a difficult relationship over time.
It can. It does. It doesn't always transform the other person because we can't control other people, but it absolutely transforms the pattern of interaction between you. And very often, when one person in a relationship genuinely and consistently stops engaging in the conflict cycle, the entire atmosphere changes. The other person may escalate temporarily because they're used to a certain reaction and are confused by its absence, but if you hold your calm, the pattern almost always settles into something more peaceful.
That makes a lot of practical sense, and it also means that my commitment to peace has to be genuine and consistent, not just something I try once and then give up on when it feels hard.
That's wisdom right there. Consistency is everything in this practice. And I want to acknowledge something very honestly because I think it's important. There will be days when you fail at this. There will be moments when the emotion is too fast or too strong, and you react before you have a chance to pause. And when that happens, the most important thing is not to then react harshly to yourself. Don't add self-criticism and shame on top of the original reaction. Instead, observe that too. Notice what happened. Ask yourself what triggered you so strongly. See if there is something to learn, and then let it go and begin again.
That is so important to say, because I think sometimes people give up on self-improvement because they expect perfection and then feel like a failure when they fall short. But this is a practice, not a performance.
Beautifully said. It's a practice, not a performance. That phrase is worth repeating and remembering. You are not trying to perform calmness for an audience. You are genuinely, slowly, imperfectly building a new relationship with your own inner world. And every single time you manage to pause, even for half a second, even if you still end up reacting, every moment of awareness is progress. Every moment where you notice what is happening inside you is a step forward.
I feel like today's conversation has genuinely shifted something in how I think about those difficult moments. The burning match, the 5-second rule, the observer on the hillside watching the clouds. These are ideas and images I know I will carry with me.
And for everyone listening, I want to offer one final thought to bring everything together. The power of not reacting is, at its heart, the power of choosing. When you react automatically and impulsively, you are being moved by the world around you like a leaf in the wind. You go wherever the emotion blows you. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you name what you feel, when you ask one honest question before you speak, you are no longer a leaf. You are a person who is choosing their direction deliberately. And that choice, repeated day after day in small moments and large ones, is what shapes the quality of your life, the health of your relationships, and the depth of your inner peace.
And I think what I'll take away most from today is that this quietness, this stillness, this ability to hold your calm in the middle of the storm, it's not something cold or distant. It's actually a very warm and deeply human strength. It's the strength of someone who values themselves enough to protect their peace and who values others enough to respond to them thoughtfully rather than just firing back with whatever first comes to mind.